Welcome back to the Tech Ed Podcast. I am your host, Matt Kirkner. And if you joined us for episode 1 with Rocky Collis, you know that we had a fascinating conversation. We talked about his company, Mustard. We talked about his technology and how he is using computer vision and artificial intelligence to improve anybody's game of baseball. And when we say anybody, we are talking about anybody that has access to a smartphone can get his free app and start using it now. It is the same methodology that people like Clayton Kershaw and Nolan Ryan used to improve their baseball pitching. And now that technology is available to everyone. So if you missed episode 1, go back and listen to last week's episode before you listen to this one, in which we talk about Rocky Collis and Mustard's technology. We talk about whether this is just another tool we can use to improve performance or whether it is truly transformative. We talk about what other sports we can be using this technology to improve performance. And we are going to talk about entrepreneurship and how we get over hurdles when we're running a business. And also we will hear Rocky's advice for the 15-year-old Rocky Collis. We know you will love this episode of the Tech Ed Podcast. Thanks for joining us. Welcome to the Tech Ed Podcast, where we visit with leaders who are shaping, innovating, and disrupting technical education. People who are not afraid to think differently, not afraid to try something new, all with the goal of securing the American dream for the next generation of STEM and workforce talent. So now, just another question on kind of the impact. I mean, we think about technologies in terms of, draw a manufacturing analogy. We have a bunch of different lean tools that we can use to improve manufacturing performance. Maybe none of them transformative on their own, but put together with other tools or solutions can transform a manufacturing operation. Kind of thinking about this the same way. Is this transformative technology that this application and this solution alone is going to transform the way sports are played, or do you see it as another tool that are used in terms of that journey of improving performance?
No, obviously, I think it's transformative. I mean, I suppose that's probably not a surprising answer, but I think for people that are around youth sports, it's obvious that there are problems we want to correct, right? Like everybody knows too many kids are getting left out. They're getting left out at the ages we've talked about, quitting before they're 14. But a lot of kids, even that are showing some talent, are getting left out at later stages because in order to be seen, in order to get recruited, you got to spend a lot of money. Not everybody has that money to spend. Now, right. Sometimes there's this concept that, well, you're going to get found, if you're good enough. And maybe that's true, but that's only if you stick with it, right? And so if you think you've got to spend a couple $1,000s a month or go to fly to some showcase in order to get seen, it's pretty discouraging.
Right.
And so we can see that in some sports that kids are dropping out at various stages because of this lack of access problem. I think that the technology we're working on, and maybe more importantly, just the concept of democratizing elite coaching can really fix this at various levels. And so that's why it's transformative. It's not especially at the younger levels, it's not another tool because it's not similar to any other tool that exists in terms of scalability, mobility, or impact. And then at the higher levels, what we haven't talked about yet is the applicability of this technology for scouting and recruiting, right? If you go see Tom House in person for a weekend, he literally tells you at the end of the weekend what your capacity is. Okay.
Yeah.
He tells you, not just how hard you throw today and how good you are and what you need to do to improve over the next 6 weeks, but he tells you here's how many miles per hour you're missing on your fastball because of mechanical inefficiencies, because of muscle imbalances or inflexibilities, right? And so he gives you an entire kind of like career roadmap of how you can correct these things over, a period of a year or 6 months or whatever is applicable for you. So from a scouting perspective, we can do all of that Tom House analysis now through computer vision. Okay, not all this is rolled out yet, but these are all things that we know we can do through computer vision with the algorithms, the AI that we've created. So we can tell people basically what their capacity is. And so doing that in a smart way, in a democratized way, we think we can start to fix what I call the logjam at the senior levels of athletics, the later on in high school levels. We can help people through the recruiting process, even if maybe they can't afford to go to the big showcases and things like that. We can allow teams, colleges, to project capacity in a smarter way, recruit kids that maybe otherwise would have gotten overlooked. And then simultaneously at the lower levels where it's less about projection, less about recruiting and data, we can give people the tools that currently don't exist at all in order to improve, in order to, we say improve in the real world, right? Like we're meeting people in the virtual world, but we're forcing them to actually improve what they do in the physical world.
Absolutely. Is there an aspect of this that also allows, I mean, look, if I'm a college scout or I'm a minor league scout and I'm thinking about, what is that talent coming up? You literally have the data available to you to say, these are the 14, 15-year-olds that have this just incredible capacity. I don't know if there's an opportunity, maybe you're already doing it, to say, all right, this is an athlete that somebody should have their eyes on and sharing that, or is it more up to that athlete to utilize what they're learning to improve, to reach that capacity, and then to compete at a level where they want to go?
It's somewhere we're going, but it's not something we're doing now. I mean, for right now, it's strictly coaching for us, and that's obviously the passion of the company. But we're collecting data that allows us to project people into the future. What I think is interesting on the scouting side is, I mean, we can predict capacity, and therefore, but somebody still has to do the work to maximize and reach their potential. And so, as this data gets more robust, and as we start to license data, and as others, similar data pops up in the world, does a scout or college coach's perspective shift a little bit? Where right now you're looking for folks that are pretty polished and they're proving their ability to perform right now, right? Clayton Kershaw, who we've been lucky to get to know pretty well. In high school, he's striking everybody out. Okay,
Right.
it wasn't hard to predict that he could be super good because he already was super good.
Sure.
Obviously, those guys are going to be the first round picks, but as you get into the couple rounds later, how much are you looking for somebody who's still striking everybody out now, but maybe at a lesser rate than Clayton, versus how much are you looking for somebody that has a known mechanical flaw that you can fix? Okay, somebody's front side is not firm enough, right? Somebody's back foot's popping up off the ground too early. That's a classic Tom House fix where we can fix that. They're going to gain a few miles an hour. So how much do you start as a scout to actually really look for mechanical flaws in the people you're drafting versus look for the polish? I think there's potentially an interesting shift coming there.
Yeah, absolutely. And we just think about it, and that's happening in every market space. Just recently, we had the chief of staff for Rogers Behavioral Health, huge behavioral health hospital, national, treat 30,000 individuals a year, talking about how they can pull data and analyze it and with just incredible precision predict when somebody is at risk of suicide, for example. Now we have, which was just fascinating. Go back and listen to that episode. It was awesome. And we're really kind of thinking about now, the more young people, more individuals you have using the Mustard app and gathering that data and from all different types of points of information, being able to use that in a predictive way is just fascinating to me. So that's fantastic. As we move into the future with the whole world of data and the amazing amounts of data that are available in every market space, as we kind of look to the future, Rocky, you've mentioned we've talked a lot about baseball. You've talked about football, talked about golf. I guess two follow-on questions. The first one is, what are the other sports that maybe you have on your radar? What are the next logical steps? And then the other question would be, are there applications for this technology outside of the world of sports?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, so look, we're working on golf. We think that'll be a really important sport for us. It's a totally different market than our other sports where it's a little less kid focused. There's a lot of older folks like us that play golf, obviously. And so it's just an entirely different business model there, which would be exciting for us. And we've got some unannounced but great partners in golf. We're excited to roll things out there. Soccer and basketball will be really important for us, and they're different sports to look at. So we're enjoying kind of the early process now of figuring out what that might look like. We've got incredible people working with us in both those sports. Mia Ham's an advisor to the company. Obviously, we're honored for that. Cindy Parlow-Cohn, who's president of U.S. Soccer, is an advisor. On the basketball side, we were lucky that Mark Cuban co-led our seed round. So
I don't think anybody's ever heard of these people.
Well, right.
Just kidding.
Right. I still, if I ever get an email or message from one of them, I still usually think it's spam because you went like that.
Right.
But we think both basketball and soccer, there's so much participation in those at the younger levels, and then figuring out how to really harness that. And they're both worldwide sports, so we're excited for both of those. After that, I mean, tennis would be important for us. We've got a great tennis player advisor that we haven't announced yet, but we're looking forward to starting to design around that. There's other sports I think are interesting that we haven't started really working on yet, but I think down the line it'll be great, like cricket, lacrosse going really fast. I know we can measure some really important things in lacrosse, so we're excited about that. I mean, you asked about non-sports. I think one thing that we'll roll out this year that's applicable across every sport, and then potentially to non-real athletes as well, let's say, is measuring muscle imbalances and flexibility. So we call these functional movement, functional strength screens. Okay, all top athletes in each of the sports we're talking about go through these screens. Anybody who's listening who plays golf has heard about these screens. Titleist Performance Institute's become very famous for doing them in golf. Tom House on the board of TPI, so he's helped design these screens. In the NFL, the NFL Combine. This is a huge part of the NFL Combine, is looking for these muscle imbalances and inflexibilities, and a lot of teams will just scratch draft prospects that don't hit the metrics they want to see, because if you fail these things, it's a big sign of injury risk. So it can be a red flag. So correcting those things at a younger age is important for our coaching as we collect data from people on these functional strength screens that'll affect the training recommendations they get from us. But we found, I mean, definitely with any golfer, but these things just relate to health and physical rehab and kind of anything physical. So those screens, I think, start to take us out of sports. The biggest thing out of sports, though, is the mental performance side. So we've talked about, you have the app where you get this initial assessment of how your body moves. Okay. And then from there, people are with us, they're funneled into classes that help them. Again, they're kind of movement focused classes. Clayton Kershaw talking about what he's feeling during his mechanics, so you can try his feel and see how it affects the way your body moves by using the app. So connected physical coaching. But we also do a mental performance class every week with Jason Goldsmith. He's got many of his athletes who join him in that class, teach, modern, really important mental performance techniques that are used by great athletes, but they're just as usable by me and you, right? I mean, they're for business folks. In fact, a lot of Jason's personal practice is with elite business folks and not just with athletes. So, he's doing guided meditations, but it's essentially executive coaching for athletes. And so I think there's a lot of interest. We see this a lot with parents and kids who are subscribed to our classes. The parents are just as interested in the mental side as the kids are. So I don't know how much we'll focus on doing that outside of sports, but there's definitely a lot of interest and use for business people learning. Okay, we're going to do a leadership class in 2 weeks with Drew Brees, right? I think there's a lot of interest from business people and hearing Drew talk about that, and not just from quarterbacks.
Absolutely. No, I mean, everything you say just sparks another thought or another question in my brain, but that was just a really fascinating answer. I have a daughter who competed in gymnastics throughout high school, actually was fortunate enough to be on the state champion gymnastics team 3 years in a row. And talk about a mental sport, being up on a balance beam as a 16-year-old kid with, 5,000 people at the state championship, what have you. And as you kind of go through the whole mental mechanics and then the physical mechanics and how tightly those are connected. Wow, that is just an incredible opportunity to take this in a yet another direction. I mean, just the opportunities and the potential for this technology to me just seems to be endless. It almost has to be difficult for you when you get up every day to figure out what to focus on and not try and do it too broadly. Is that a challenge?
I think that's the challenge. Yeah, and no, it is. I mean, we're doing a lot. And especially as a small startup, but even as we grow, I think focus will always be the biggest challenge for us. It's when you mentioned gymnastics, it's the reason athletic training is helpful for people. I mean, you can get these lessons from something other than athletics, of course, but at least for the folks in our company, the lessons you need to be a successful business person, we got from sports. So again, gymnastics, the same as baseball. how much of success is just the willingness to get up and try it again, right? I mean, I'm sure I never did gymnastics, but I would guess you have to fall a lot and mess things up a lot, and you have to be willing to just get back up on the bar. And it's the same in baseball. It's like, Clayton talks about this all the time. It's like, you can give up a home run and that batter is going to come up again. And so what's your approach the next time? Are you thinking about the home run? Or are you willing to just, compete full on with a clear mind? Giving kids those lessons, that's what we think is most important. I remember when I was in college, one of my teammates' dads had started this great commodity trading firm. Okay, and they crushed it and done great. And I got to know him pretty well. And he had this recruiting philosophy where he recruited athletes from certain sports, from certain schools. And he had it boiled down to like, because in these positions in certain sports, you've learned these lessons, X, Y, and Z. And a lot of it is just, being willing to fail and keep trying. And yeah, that's we always think about the kind of physical to mental training pipeline and trying to take as many kids as possible. We feel like we have to hook them with helping them improve physically. That's like the initial point of interest in Mustard. But we want to get them to take mental performance classes with us because that's where we think we actually change their life.
That's absolutely fascinating. You think about one of our mantras is successful people are just those who stood up one more time than they fell down. Tying that and you mentioned that's true in baseball, that's true in gymnastics, that's totally true in business, right? How many entrepreneurs have failed multiple times before finally finding success, and in some cases finding success and then failing again at something else and getting up and starting all over. I've got a friend of mine who owns a company who his first question in an interview is, what sports did you participate in high school or college? And
Wow.
that's the very first question. And he said, if somebody doesn't have a good answer for how they competed, and it doesn't have to necessarily be sports, maybe it could be competing in debate, or maybe it could be or forensics, or competing in, now we have esports. And that's obviously a growing opportunity for young people to compete. But where did you compete? And then I never even thought about the idea of, all right, to be successful as a shortstop is different mentally and physically than to be successful as a pitcher or as a gymnast or as a cyclist or whatever that sport is that you competed in. And then how do we tie that into where will you be most successful in business? It's another fascinating aspect. This podcast could go on for, I think, about 5 or 6 hours.
For me, like entrepreneurial journey, you meet other entrepreneurs that are, a stage ahead of you or a stage behind you. And I love sharing thoughts and advice both directions on that, and the amount you learn from people. And for us, we've been lucky on the fundraising side over time, and we put out press releases on that. And when you just see the press release of a fundraising announcement as an entrepreneur, you assume it was easy for the person if you're on the outside.
Right.
Oh, this person must be great at fundraising or whatever. They had fancy friends or whatever, and the money came easily. So people always ask me if they're just starting their fundraising journey. They ask me, well, how'd you do it? What's the secret? How do you, And I feel like it's always disappointing for people, but the fundraising, at least for me, it was never easy. I mean, I think we raised money because I say I was willing to get punched in the face 1,000 times, and then you got 10 people to say yes,
Right.
But you had to get punched 1,000 times first, and just be willing
For
to
sure.
embarrass yourself and keep doing it. And
learn along the way. And
and willingness to be embarrassed doesn't make it any easier, but that's kind of just what it takes. I think that's the only secret. So then the Kershaw example, in the last class we did with him live, he was going over his off-season training program, which was really cool. But then we bring people up on stage and they get to ask questions at the end, virtual stage.
Cool. Yeah.
And somebody asked, basically, we're talking about off-season training, and somebody asked, can you look at a young pitcher's work ethic and tell whether they're going to make it in the major leagues? Like somebody who just gets called up, can you tell based on their work ethic? And I thought he would say yes. He's a really smart, thoughtful guy. He said no. He said, usually, oftentimes people get called up to the big leagues. They're so physically talented that the reality is they haven't had to work that hard yet.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. And yep. I think he's saying that was probably the case for him. He was so physically talented that he was blowing everybody away growing up. He said, but I can tell whether somebody's going to make it by how competitive they are. Okay. So it's not their work ethic, but I can tell watching a young pitcher how they react to losing, how bad they want to win, whether they're going to stick around. Because if somebody's competitive enough as a Major League Baseball player, the work ethic is going to follow. All right. They're going to lose for the first time as a big leaguer. And if they're going to fold and not be okay with that, they're not going to make it. But if they're a real competitor and they compete every pitch, they're going to figure it out. The work ethic's going to follow and they're going to stick.
Drawing another corollary, I have a really good friend who spends a lot of time in the whole personality profile world, and doing profiles on individuals and in measuring how competitive they are, what their sense of urgency is, how social they are, how their attention to detail, how emotional they are, and a lot of these things you can discern again using AI and using huge data sets and asking lots of people lots of questions, and he's got that down to a science. One of the things that he says is exactly what you just said, Rocky, which is, you look at these other data points, whether it's sociability or sense of urgency or attention to detail. And I asked him one time, I said, how is it that some of these people who don't necessarily have those personality traits can be so successful in areas where you wouldn't think that they would be successful? And he said, if the drive and the competitiveness is strong enough and high enough, they'll find a way to overcome those other areas of their personality. And it sounds like Clayton Kershaw is kind of saying the same thing, which is, yeah, they're all elite athletes if they're getting to that point. But somebody who really wants to win, and in my case, I even hate losing more than I love winning, and I would say they're both important. Will find a way to make those corrections along the way, to stick with it, to remain competitive, and to do the work that they need to do in order to rise to the level that they're hoping to rise to, or that we want to see them rise to. It sounds like it's kind of the same thing. Are you seeing it the same way?
Totally the same way. Yeah. And I think the hate losing versus love winning thing is an interesting thing to analyze too. I'm going to borrow that next time we do it. Maybe I'll ask Drew about that. But I think there's something to, what level are you going to push it to until you're, really deep down satisfied?
Exactly. So, a couple last questions. We've spent quite a bit of time together. You're such a fascinating guest that I just want to keep going. But you got to pinch yourself some days and wake up and say, well, if I couldn't be a major league ball player, this has got to be pretty darn close to the next best thing. Talk about, if I'm a young person and I'm listening to this, and we do have a lot of students that listen, and we have teachers that'll play the podcast for their for their students. What is your advice for somebody who wants to get started in an endeavor like the one that you're in?
So much advice. Yeah, email me and I'll give you personalized advice. I think the advice is going to
There
be
you go.
personalized. Yeah. Rocky at Team MSTRD, if anybody wants to email me. Now, look, I think you're right. I do pinch myself. I think that I actually enjoy this role. I wouldn't even call it a job. I enjoy what I'm doing now more than I would enjoy being a Major League Baseball player. As
Wow.
much as I wanted to play Major League Baseball and that was my dream, of course I would have loved it, but like this is perfect for me. But look, to get here, I had to work jobs for years that I frankly didn't like that much. I mean, I was a lawyer and I ended up having some clients I loved working on, like the Players Association for the U.S. women's soccer team. But I did a lot of legal work that I just had to do, and it was good training for me, and I liked the people and all that, but it wasn't the work that I wanted to do long term. So I think for me, finding the right career path was a little bit like fundraising.
Right.
You got to be willing to get punched in the face for a while.
Right.
And so I think that, if I was going to boil down one piece of advice for kids, it's or for people, looking to find that path. When you find the right opportunity, of course, don't be afraid to jump in and go for it. And there's going to be a lot of fear associated with that, and that's okay. The fear is gonna help you, so go for it. But also be willing to slog through and do things that maybe don't seem the most enjoyable for a while, realizing that you're always banking the learnings. So even if you're working in a job that you don't think you're going to be in forever, you don't want to be in forever, learn as much as you can, develop all the relationships you can, and you don't know where they're going to turn out, right? So just do the best you can, compete every day. Things are going to work out in a good way.
So that's great advice for any young person thinking about how they take, in your case, the convergence of sports and technology and your legal background and an understanding of investment banking and so on, and turning that into a really, really cool opportunity and a really cool company. I've got one last question for Rocky Collis, and that is, if you could turn the clock back and give some advice to the 15-year-old Rocky, what would that advice be?
It's hard for me now to come up with good advice that isn't baseball related. So as much as I said I wouldn't want to I like what I'm doing better than playing Major League Baseball. I've learned so much from these people that I feel like could have really changed my baseball career, that that's where my brain automatically goes.
Sure.
So I'll give you something in the sports category.
Yeah.
One of our soccer advisors is Anson Dorrance. Okay. He's got to be the winningest sports team coach of all time in any sport. All right. He's the women's soccer coach at University of North Carolina. I think he's been there 40. I'm going to, fudge the numbers a little bit, but he's been there something like 40 years and he's won like 25 national championships. He's literally won the national championship most years he's been there, and he's been there forever.
Amazing.
And he's just, he's as impactful a speaker and as sage as you would expect somebody that successful to be. And so, when we ask him, what are the couple things that are most important in his program? Number one, he fosters competition. Number two, it's fun. And then a third one, he doesn't necessarily talk about them in this order, but these are the three that resonate with me. Number three, he always helps athletes get their personal narrative as close to the truth as possible. Okay. So what do most of us do in athletics or professionally? We create these personal narratives that protect ourselves, that make us feel. Especially as a young athlete, I think I told myself I was good at a lot of things. I believed I was good at a lot of things that I actually needed to work on, right?
Sure.
For example, I was convinced I had perfect mechanics because I had worked hard on it and I had studied it. And so therefore it must be perfect. But I was never really shown a mirror to my mechanics and forced to realize the things that needed to be improved. And so I think for every 15-year-old out there, you are creating personal narratives. Everybody is creating personal narratives that are not true. And if your narrative isn't true, then you don't know what to work on and you will not improve. But if you can just force yourself to really understand and be honest with yourself about what you're good at, where there's opportunities for improvement, you naturally will improve on the things that you're supposed to improve on. The important thing, and this is a big premise of Mustard. We're trying to be an application that holds a mirror to people for what they're doing physically. If you really understand ground truth, cold-hearted, what are the opportunities for improvement? You'll figure it out. You'll improve in those categories. And then, exponential benefits from there.
And that's true in athletic performance. It's really true in any endeavor in life. So awesome answer. Great advice for a 15-year-old Rocky Collis. If our listeners are interested, by the way, in downloading the app, where do they find it?
Yep, Apple Store, Mustard. You just search for Mustard pitching in the App Store. You'll find it. If you're a quarterback, go to our website, TEAMMSTRD. So it's like Team Mustard, but no vowels in Mustard. TEAMMSTRD.com, and then you can sign up for the beta for our football application, and we'll get you in there. Yeah, love to hear from anybody. Really appreciate you having me on. It was fun. Thank you.
Oh, we had an absolute great time. And you think about just all the ground that we covered, from artificial intelligence, machine learning, sticking to it, raising capital, certainly the democratization of world-class coaching, and your incredible soul and mission that you're after, really improving the lives of what could, and I'm sure you hope to be, millions upon millions of young people in the coming years. So we wish you all the best, Rocky. Good fortune. And again, thank you so much for taking so much time for us.
Thank you very much. Great to be here.
Thanks for joining us for this episode of the Tech Ed Podcast. If you haven't already, subscribe, leave a review, and if you like this episode, share it with a friend. New episodes launch every Tuesday, so listen in next week.